John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer and rapist who took the lives of at least 33 young males in Cook County, Illinois. Burying most under his house, other bodies were recovered from the nearby Des Plaines River. Sometimes known as the Killer Clown for his habit of dressing in a clown costume and makeup, Gacy had an abusive childhood and struggled with his homosexuality. After being convicted of sexual assault in 1968, Gacy's murders were discovered. Gacy was born on March 17 in 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. The son of Danish and Polish parents, Gacy and his siblings grew up with an alcoholic father who would beat the children with a razor strap if they were perceived to have misbehaved. His father physically assaulted Gacy's mother as well. Gacy's sister Karen would later say that the siblings learned to toughen up against the beatings and that Gacy would not cry. Gacy suffered further alienation at school, unable to play with the other children because of an inherited heart condition that it was looked upon by his father as another feeling. He later realised he was attracted to men and experienced great turmoil over his sexuality. Gacy worked as a fast food chain manager during the 1960s and became a self-made building contractor and Democratic precinct captain in the Chicago suburbs in the 1970s. Well liked in his community, Gacy organised cultural gatherings and was an active in political organisations and the Gacy's civic group. He was married and divorced twice and had 2 biological children in addition to 2 stepdaughters. Gacy was a member of a Chicago area Jolly Joker clown club and frequently performed in clown attire and makeup at the children's parties, charity fundraisers and other events. When he murdered people, he sometimes dressed as his alter egos, Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown. The killer clown sometimes lured his victims with the promise of construction work or some other ruse, and then captured, sexually assaulted, tortured, and eventually strangled most of them with his hands or with a rope. Years later, during a conversation with detectives while he was under surveillance, Gacy discussed his work as a clown, remarking, "Clowns can get away with murder." In 1968, Gacy was convicted of sexually assaulting 2 teen boys and was given a 10-year prison sentence. He was released on parole in the summer of 1970, but was arrested again following the year after another teen accused Gacy of sexual assault. The charges were dropped when the boy didn't appear during the trial. By the middle of the 1970s, 2 more young males accused Gacy of rape, and he would be questioned by the police about the disappearance of others. Gacy referred to this period of his life as his cruising years, when he committed most of his murders. On December 11, 1978, 15-year-old Robert Paiste went missing. It was reported to police that the boy was last seen by his mother at a drugstore where he worked before he headed out to meet Gacy to discuss a potential construction job. 10 days later, a police search of Gacy's house in Norwood Park, Illinois, uncovered the evidence of his involvement in numerous crimes, including murder. It was later discovered that Gacy had committed his first known killing in 1972, taking the life of 16-year-old Timothy McCoy after luring the youth to his home. After a lengthy period of police surveillance and investigation, and the discovery of several trenches filled with human remains in the crawl space between his house, Gacy eventually confessed to killing about 30 people. Victim number 24. Over the years, there have been lingering concerns that Gacy may have been responsible to the deaths of other people whose bodies who have yet to be found. And when police uncovered human remains in Gacy's house in 1978, 8 bodies could not be identified. More recently, Cook County authorities used DNA evidence to identify Gacy's unidentified victims. In 2017, one of those men, victim number 24, was identified as 16-year-old Jimmy Byron Hackinson. In 1976, Hackinson left his house in St. Paul, Minnesota, and travelled to Chicago to begin life in the city. On August 5th, he called his mother to let her know he had arrived. However, police believed Gacy killed him shortly thereafter. In 1979, Hackinson's mother had contacted the authorities to find out if her son was one of Gacy's victims, but she didn't have dental records and the department lacked sufficient resources to identify him as a victim. Haggins's mother died in the early 2000s, but family members provided DNA samples in 2017, and authorities made an immediate match to victim number 24. Gacy's trial began on February 6, 1980, with Gacy having to confess to the crimes. The arguments were focused on whether he could be declared insane and thus remitted to a state mental facility. Gacy had told police that the murders had been committed by an alternate personality, while mental health professionals testified for both sides about Gacy's mental state. After a short jury deliberation, Gacy was ultimately found guilty of committing 33 murders, and he became known as one of the most ruthless serial killers in the US. He was sentenced to serve 12 death sentences and 21 natural life sentences. Quick facts. He had an abusive childhood. He performed as a clown at kids' parties. He's guilty of 33 murders. He was given 12 death sentences, and he died by the lethal injection. Gacy was imprisoned at the Menard Correctional Center in Illinois for almost a decade and a half, appealing the sentence and offering contradictory statements on the murders in interviews. Though he had confessed, Gacy later denied being guilty of the charges and had a 900 telephone number set up with a 12-minute record statement declaring his innocence. As both anti-death penalty forces and those in favour of the execution made their opinions known, Gacy died by lethal injection on May 10, 1994 at the Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois. He killed his victim by asphyxiation or strangulation. 26 of his victims were buried in the crawl space of his home. His first victim actually escaped. He had picked the boy up from school but had forgotten to get locks in the back of his car. The boy jumped out, and a few months later, he seen John on the news. For his last meal, Gacy requested 12 fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe KFC, French fries, and a pound of strawberries. Prior to being convicted, Gacy's managed 3 KFC restaurants. His last words were, "Kiss my ass."